The next thing that Jesus did, the life choice that he made, that helped him be able to experience joy and peace and a sense of fulfillment during the time where he was facing struggles in his life, was that he surrounded himself with God-centered friends. Now, Jesus spent time with all kinds of people. He didn't just spend time with religious people. He didn't just spend time with people whose lives were centered on God. That wasn't what Jesus did. But what he did do was he made sure that he built a group of friends around him whose lives were centered on God. And I'm not saying they were perfect. In fact, they were far from perfect. We'll see that as we read on soon. But in John 15, verse 15, speaking to his disciples, he said, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. Jesus surrounded himself with God-centered friends. He had these disciples with him all during the time of his ministry, teaching them, going through life with them, and all along he was building friendships with them, so that it got to the point that even though he was the master and they were his disciples, he said, I'm not calling you servants, I'm calling you friends, because now you know my business. And Jesus relied on those friends, wanted to be with them. When times got difficult, when times got hard, he wanted to be with those friends. Look over with me in Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26, starting in verse 36. We see this great story about how Jesus knew that he wanted his disciples to be with him. Matthew 26, 36. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. You know what? When Jesus was getting ready to face being arrested, when he knew he was going to be falsely accused, and he knew he was going to have to face the crucifixion, what did he want to do? Yes, he wanted to go and pray. He wanted to be with God. That's absolutely true. But he didn't want to do it alone. He brought his disciples up there with him, and then even when he went over to the side, away from the other disciples, he brought some of his closest friends who also were God-centered, and he asked, hey, would you stay here and pray with me, keep watch with me? And he went a little further and he prayed. Now in the rest of the story, we find out that these disciples, these God-centered friends, were not perfect. Because what we find out is they fell asleep at this incredible time in Jesus' life when he needed them most and he wanted them to be there praying for him. They couldn't stay awake. They fell asleep, which I don't blame them, because I know I get to a certain period of time at night and I'm going to fall asleep. I can't tell you how many times I have been laying in bed with my wife and we're like, let's pray before we go to sleep. How many times have I prayed? Have I fallen asleep? Not just while my wife is praying, I've even fallen asleep in the middle of praying myself. And my wife will have to be like, honey, did you fall asleep? So I understand these disciples. They're not perfect, but they were God-centered. And Jesus wanted them there with him through his life as he carried out his ministry and when he had to face the most difficult, challenging times in his life.